Hello all, this is a video tutorial for the SharePoint Helper app as displayed on the left here that I've been developing. It should be used for creating the JSON conditional formatting for modern SharePoint lists. It'll help guide power users through it if they haven't done it or don't do it too often, but also greatly reduce the amount of time it takes to develop it by experts as well. So I hope you find it useful. To get started, I'll talk about the help button on the top right. Underneath it, we'll find quite a few useful links. The first one being the JSON formatting documentation by Microsoft. For the purposes of this initial tutorial, I'm going to assume that you know how to do this and show you how the app functions, and hope you find value in it. So there's also this SharePoint Fabric link as well to take you to that, but I'll show you that later as well. And the JSON linked site is very useful. As we move forward in this, I'll show you, things get pretty complicated. So I do have the ability to use functions, but as you can see, it gets pretty intense down here. I don't format it very properly. So if you just copy and paste it at any point into JSON lint, it'll make it nice and pretty for you. So that's a pretty useful link. Other than that, I do have the app-specific video tutorial for that you're watching right now, as well as the source code for this app as well. So all that can be found under Help. And just to give a general layout of the app, I do have some quick adds here that I'll get into later, some templates that are pre-built. We do have the element type and the text content field here, as well as a little help button that gives you contextual help. So this value will be displayed in each cell because it's talking about the text content. If I do type test here and copy and paste it as I'm formatting this title field, all of the fields now say test, right? It does have the ability to use variables, which I'll get into later, functions and math, as well as, and that's it. So, moving forward, we do have the attributes, properties, and custom row actions available as displayed here. But the children element, I'll show you a workaround. I don't have it implemented at this point. I would like to clean up the code base first. So that's just a general introduction of the app. Oh, I do have the reset and copy to clipboard buttons down here. So at any point you can reset or copy to the clipboard. So, I hope you find this useful. And yeah. Now I'd like to talk about some very important aspects to this app that should be noted. So we do support variables, functions, and math. So mainly the multiply, divide, add, or concatenate with the plus plus, subtract with minus minus, and parentheses to support order of operations. All that stuff is included, and I'll show you an example in a minute. But we also have functions, and so this number function is going to be very useful if you're trying to do any type of math. This is very important. So if I wanted to show 5 divided by 3, it's showing strings here, right? And so you're trying to divide two strings, and it doesn't really understand what's going on, right? Nothing is displayed. So what we can do is we can wrap that into a number function, and this will evaluate at this point to 1.66. And just to show you that you can also do some order of operations, I'll take this, which is saying 5 divided by 3 plus 2, and you see it's 3.66. But if I wrap it in parentheses, the 3 plus 2, so now it's 5 divided by 3 plus 2, it does respect those parentheses and it displays 1. So if you try to do any math on either in this field, or if you have, some kind of, other field here, right? Another column, then you can do math using that number function. And just as a side note, with those variables, they, they're right here. So you can kind of see how to use, other field names or the current field, right? You can see the lookup value and some properties for the people pickers, right? The ID, title, email. So you can use that as well. You'll see down here that this is very crazy. That does not format very properly. So if I copy and paste it, as we get more complicated, you can validate it and it'll just pretty it up so you can actually read what's going on here. So that's very useful. Another thing to note as we move forward is that rules are read from top to bottom. Okay, so when we move into this and we start adding conditions, which I'll show you later, if we add, the first condition and then the second condition, they're read from top to bottom, and this should be noted for, you should already know this if you play around with JSON, but I just wanted to point it out because, you have a conditional operator, and then if it's true, then it's displaying this value, and then if it's false, then it comes down and continues. So just wanted to point that out, and we'll jump into this a little bit more now. Hello, so now I would like to talk to you I already have talking about the variables, functions, and math that is supported, but I'd like to give some examples. So we do have variables, for example, for now, and if you do that, you'll see that we are now displaying the date and time, the current date and time. We also, if you look at the help, have available functions, so it'll kind of tell you what it does, right? ToLocalDateString displays a date and type with just the date, right? So if I wrap that now function in here and copy and paste it, just like in regular JSON, you'll see that it only displays the date. We can also change that and say time, right? So now it's displaying only the time. At this point, we can take a look at some templates. So if I wanted to look at the data bars from 0 to 1 and data bars from 0 to 100, Microsoft documentation shows an example for data bars. So I think for theirs, it's only 0 through 100 because it takes the current field's value right here. If I have a %complete field, it takes the current field's value and will set it as the width percentage, right? So that is one template that I have available. You can also select from 0 to 1 because if I just paste the same formula here, it doesn't work at all, right? So basically you have to use from 0 to 1, and you see it does some formula here, right? So for the width, it's saying that the value of the width should be the current field's value times 100, all right? And then you want to concatenate that with the percentage character, and then if we paste that and preview it, you can see that now all of these fields look proper, right? And we can also come up to the top and say, oh, for the text content, the current field's value is being displayed. If I want to concatenate that with the percentage sign, I can now display that here. And now all these fields values have the percentage sign. I can add a space, and so that way there's a space. Now it looks kind of weird, but that's the point, is that you can start using some of these math functions to concatenate and do whatever you want to do. So there's that. We also have the completed, in progress, and late template. So here I'll kind of talk about how you can use these templates for your benefit, right? So if we have the status field here, and you can use them to learn and format this field, we can copy to clipboard, right? And now paste that in, and you'll see that late and in progress are now colored red and yellow. Well, why didn't it do complete? Because here we say completed. If the current field is equal to completed, then it's going to be this color green, but this field is equal to complete. So if I just click this to select it, I can come up here and change the formula to when the current field is equal to complete, then it's going to be green. And if I click edit condition, you'll see that it just changed. I'll copy to the clipboard and now paste it, and it's complete. Now what if I want to add another one? If I just deselect this by clicking on it, I can say the current field is equal to not started, then it's going to be orange, and add a new condition, copy this to the clipboard, and now very easily we now have the orange displayed here. So if you wanted to play with that, you can also add new CSS properties as well. Here we can add a I'll say border radius to 25 pixels, just to show that it can kind of just round it off a little bit. So now we just added the border radius. You can add. We also have quick add up here. So quick add, if you select a template, it will reset the entire form to this template. But with quick add, it's just going to add these properties to it, right? So we can have the bold font, and then we add bold font. We just copy and paste. Here we go. Now everything's bold. So very quickly you can kind of play around with this and see what fields look like. So that was just a quick introduction to templates and how some of these CSS properties work. I'll talk about these in more detail in the next video. At this point, I'd like to talk about the attributes, CSS properties, and custom row actions and their layout. So if I select any one of these, so it will come up with a value or a name here that you can use. For example, for attributes, it'll let you use href, target, class, icon name, and then the value that you want to assign to that. For property, it is contextual help. So if you wanted to select the drop down, it'll say, oh, do you want to use the background color, font size, border radius, any of these, but you're not limited to them. So if you type in opacity, it will start displaying down here as well. So you can type in, you're not limited to these, and there are actually a lot. So if I look at the documentation and scroll all the way or pretty close to the bottom here, all of these CSS properties are available. So some of them more useful than others, but if you want to use any of them, then you can just type them in. You're not limited to this list. For the property help, you can select help here. It should open W3 schools to that specific one. So this is opacity. If you have the background color selected, you select help, it'll go to background color, so on and so forth. And then for the value in the background color or color, it should open a XML color picker, so you can start selecting any of these colors and just type in those, and it'll give you an idea of what it'll look like. So if we wanted to do a quick example of how to use this, I'll set the element type to A because I want to set an href, and right now I will set it to google.com. And if I add another attribute for the target, it'll give me a recommendation of what can be used here. So like a blank, and I can paste it in, and oh, nothing's being displayed because I don't have anything here. It's a blank field, and I'll type go to Google, and at this point you'll see a go to Google link. I can select it, and it takes me to Google. So there's that. Now custom row actions work very similarly. They have actions, they have action parameters, and it'll give you an idea of what you want to do. So if you just copy and paste your flow ID into here, you can trigger a flow. And yeah, that's pretty much the general layout of how this works. So next I'll talk about conditions as we move forward. So in the previous example, I gave a go to Google quick example for how to use hrefs and add attributes. So I'd like to talk about CSS properties and this add condition field that you can add to any attribute, any property, any custom row action down here, and it'll add a conditional logic to your JSON that lets you make it a little bit more customizable. So for example, I'll use font size just because it's a pretty obvious example. If I want to say everything is going to be 120-50% the original font, I can show that here, and go to Google gets a little bit bigger. So let's say I wanted to add a conditional logic to it. It's going to take the first operand, so it says if the current field is equal to some other value, then it's going to use this value here. So what I'm actually going to do is utilize this help button here, and you'll see in variables that you can use a field name, right? So I already have the field name here mapped out for task name. It's the field directly to the right, so this task name field here. So if I wanted to say, okay, if for the current row, if the task name is equal to task 1, then I want to make this 125%. Then I add this new condition and copy and paste this code. And then now, for every field, only if its task is 1, then it's going to be 150%. And so you can add other CSS properties and say, okay, well, I want to make the background color, and then add another condition for these background colors and say, okay, if the, and we'll say the same field, if the task name field is equal to task 2, then I want to make this yellow. And then we'll just add one more and we'll say if it's 3, then we'll make it green. And if I copy this to clipboard and then paste it here, you'll see that task 2 is now yellow, task 3 is now green, and then you can do that for any of these attributes. So in this example, if you had task 1 or task of 2, then you can change the href here. You can concatenate and add fields. So let's say you wanted to say, okay, well, I want to also concatenate to this field. It's going to take me to google.com/ the field task name field. And if I use this now and preview and select it, you'll see that it's taking me to task. %20 is a space, right? So that's just how it's URL encoded. It's not found, but so that just clicking on that took me to task 1. Task 3 will take me to the URL for task 3. So you can concatenate and can use variables just like that as well. So that's just an example. But yeah, so that's how you kind of use conditions. If I wanted to change some of these and say, okay, well, task 2, you know what, instead of yellow, I want to make it a different color, so I can select the condition that I want to modify, and then change that to maybe orange and select edit condition. And so now you see it's orange. If I copy this to the clipboard and paste it, now it's orange, right? If you want to add more after that, just note it's kind of hard to note. Maybe I'll add a little arrow here to note that it's selected, but just click it to deselect it, and then you can just start adding more fields. So I'll just say if 1 or if 3 is equal to 3, then I'll make everything red, and so that will or should make all the other fields red, because if you note at the very top, remember I say rules are read from top to bottom, and that's just basic knowledge for this JSON stuff. Rules are read from top to bottom, so it's orange and then green and then red. The logic for task 2 never reaches this for that field, if that makes sense. So if I wanted to come over here to the JSON lint and show you this really fast, these question mark fields, I know I assumed you guys had knowledge, but I'll just show you. So these question mark fields are conditional operators, and it says if this condition is true, so if task name is equal to 2 is true, then it's going to be orange here, and then the logic stops there. So for that row, as it continues, if it's equal to 3, then it's going to be this field, this color, which is going to be green, and then everything else is going to be red. So that's just a little bit of information on that and how conditions work. Now I'd like to talk about children. I do not have the functionality in the app yet. I want to really clean up the code base before that happens, as I've extended it a few times and just like to clean it up. So in the interim, there is kind of a workaround solution. If I just remove this text content and have a div here, I will show you how you can kind of build it from scratch. Or not from scratch, but at least from a, you can build it outside of the app and use the app to build all the pieces inside. So if you just have a children attribute here, just like we have style or attributes or custom row actions, we can start dropping in the output of this app into each child element or each child object. So for example, if I wanted to add a span that says test, and then maybe add a new attribute, that's an icon, I can click on the help here, and it knows that I'm looking at the icon name, and it'll surface this, which says, hey, follow this link, and you can look at the fabric icons that are available. So you might not know them from heart, but you can follow that link, and if you scroll down, you'll see a whole bunch of icons that you can use here. For example, this Azure logo, we'll copy that. On the left-hand side, they have brand icons. If you scroll down, there are several brand icons that you can look at, as well as the localization has some more, arrows and such that you can use. So if I just take this and copy and paste it here to use the Azure logo, I can set a new CSS property and set the color equal to red, and then just kind of playing around, I can also add a class. So just similar to icon name, you can select the help when the class is selected, and it'll tell you, hey, you can use SharePoint SharePoint framework classes, but also they have animations and typography that are available as well. So if I select animations and scroll down, they do have, for example, the slide left in class that I can add here. And if I copy this to the clipboard, I can start adding these children elements. So like beautify. I can copy and paste this. And so it just slid in from the left to that Azure logo. If I wanted to reset this now and say, okay, well now I want to add a link that will take me to Microsoft, I can add a new CSS property, I can add a border, and it gives me an example of what I might want to do. So like 2 pixels solid black, and I can add a new attribute that says it's an href to Microsoft.com, as well as opening it in a new tab as well. So if I copy and paste this, I can take, this is the previous output right here, and if I just want to append another child element, I just put a comma, copy and paste the output again. I'll beautify it for you guys, and you copy and paste this code to your app, and there you go. So now you have to Microsoft with a border around it, and then the app will, or the test comes in with the animation. If I select to Microsoft, it opens in a new page to Microsoft. So you can kind of get an idea of how children elements work. They kind of just append onto each other in this sense, and that's how you build them. I will hopefully have functionality in the app whenever I find time, but I do want to clean up the code base. So that's a nice workaround for now. So at this point, I'd like to talk about 2 useful actions. One is adding flow capability, workflow capability to your JSON list, as well as cleaning up some long text fields. So just to get started, if we select button here, and I want to quick add a Microsoft flow, it already adds action and action params, execute flow, and flow ID here. All I need to do is copy and paste my flow ID, which I already have open. It's a super simple flow. It just runs and sends an email. But I just copy and paste that, paste it into the flow ID here, and then I'll just say run flow for this item. And if I copy and paste this, you'll see now there's a run flow for this item. You can jazz up this button if you'd like as well. You can add a background color to blue. You can, select border radius, set it to like 15. You can, set the border to 2 pixels solid black. I mean, this is not going to look very pretty, but you get the idea. You can pretty easily, format your button or do whatever you want to do for this. That's pretty intense. So maybe you want to say light blue, so just kind of play around to get it the way that you want. And then if I save this, now I have this button here that will run the flow for me, or at least start flow, but it's kind of odd. always have issues with this. There we go. So it's just starting on the left-hand side. It says JSON demo, which is the name of my flow. And then, I can select to run it. If I wanted to add conditions here for action parameters, I can select flow ID, and maybe I want one flow ID for, if the task is equal, if the task name field is equal to 1, and then maybe I want a condition that says if it's equal to 2, I want to run a different flow, so these two items would run different flows based on the button click. You could do stuff like that if you really wanted to, but like I said, you can add conditions to any of these properties. One last thing that I wanted to mention, which people might find pretty useful, is for these multiple lines of text fields in modern lists, they always get cut off. And so, how do you resolve that? If I select the text overflow option here, there is a text overflow property called auto. It will automatically, make this look a little bit prettier, but multiple lines of text fields have no format here. You can't find the formatting option, so I have to go to the gear and select list settings. And then in the multiple lines of text field, I'll just open it in a new tab and copy and paste this to here. And if I refresh, it'll show me all of it, but it might be too long depending on the field name, right? So depending on the amount of text that you have here, it might be kind of ridiculously long. So you can add another property called max height and just set it to, some arbitrary length or height that you would like. And then if I, copy and paste this again, just playing around with it to get it the way that I want, then it'll be that height, and then it'll be a scroll bar. So 70 might be too small, but you get the idea. So that's also pretty useful, and something somebody asked for me recently as well. Yeah, so that's something that you can use. So this concludes the SharePoint Helper demo and tutorial. So let me know any suggestions in the comments of this video. A couple things that I haven't mentioned: if you add new attribute, new CSS properties, these on the left-hand side grow, so you'll be able to try to keep track as you build more, where all these are for custom row actions and properties, and then eventually the children that I will add on the left hand as well. So it'll be more useful then. For any individual item, you can select the X to delete them. If you select clear all from any specific category, it'll also clear all those out. So, again, feel free to comment on this video, suggestions. I have a lot of things that I'd like to work on. If you have any suggestions for templates that you think other people might find useful, any other features or functionality, I'm definitely working on this in my in whatever time I can. So bear with me as I implement other features. But at this point, I think it's fully functional in a sense that it'll definitely help you speed up development. And if you just play around, it's kind of fun. So thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.